Now, Indonesia is set to host the annual G20 summit, but what is G20 grouping all about? How does it work?
Now, the G20 summit on the Indonesian island of Bali has ended with a joint declaration condemning the war in Ukraine.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has officially taken over India's G20 presidency from the Indonesian President Joko Widodo in Bali.
Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. In this video we are talking about the G20 Summit Indonesia 2022, all the key agreements reached. But before we continue our video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for more interesting videos. G20 leaders met for a two-day summit hosted by the Indonesian G20 presidency in Bali, under the theme Recover Together, Recover Stronger. Charles Michel, President of the European Council, and Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, represented the EU. Here are key takeaways from the meeting. Condemning Russian aggression. Meetings of G20 ministers earlier this year ended without joint declarations because of Russian opposition to references to the war in Ukraine. This week, leaders adopted a declaration deploring Russia's aggression in Ukraine in the strongest terms and demanding its unconditional withdrawal. They also recognized that while most members condemned the war in Ukraine, there were other views and different assessments of the situation and sanctions. Participants said the statement was unanimously adopted. The summit's host, Indonesian President Joko Widodo, said all had shown flexibility. Most members strongly condemned the war in Ukraine and stressed it is causing immense human suffering and exacerbating existing fragilities in the global economy, constraining growth, increasing inflation, disrupting supply chains, heightening energy and food insecurity, and elevating financial stability risks. U.S.-China ties on better footing. The summit was preceded by a bilateral meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and Chinese leader 𝐥𝐸𝐤𝐵, the first time the two had met since Biden became president. Although there were few tangible results, it was overall a positive meeting after relations between the superpowers plunged to near historic lows earlier in the year. Both sides said while the three-hour meeting laid out major differences, especially over Taiwan, trade restrictions and technology transfers, the two agreed to keep communications open and avoid confrontation. Perhaps the most concrete outcome was that U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken now plans to visit to China early next year, the highest-level U.S. visit to China in more than 4 years. Focus on global economy. The G20 economies agreed in their declaration to pace interest rate rises carefully to avoid spillovers and warned of increased volatility in currency moves, a sea change from last year's focus on mending the scars of the COVID-19 pandemic. The reference to spillovers was a nod to emerging economies' concerns about the potential for huge capital outflows if aggressive U.S. rate increases continue. With the Ukraine war, as well as massive pandemic-era spending packages blamed for fueling red-hot inflation, the G20 countries said further fiscal stimulus measures should be temporary and targeted. Food security. The leaders promised to take coordinated action to address food security challenges and applauded the Black Sea Grains Initiative, but civil society groups criticized what they said was the absence of concrete steps on hunger. The G20 is merely repeating old commitments from previous years or noting developments elsewhere, rather than taking on leadership themselves, said Friedrich Rotter of the group Global Citizen. 50 million people are at the brink of starvation as we speak. There is no time for the G20 to issue calls to action. They are the ones who have to act. Climate change. G20 leaders agreed to pursue efforts to limit the global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, confirming they stand by the temperature goal from the 2015 Paris Agreement on climate change. That could boost negotiations at the UN COP27 climate summit in Egypt, where some negotiators feared the G20 would fail to back the 1.5°C goal, potentially thwarting a deal among the nearly 200 countries at the UN talks. On the sidelines of the summit, the United States, Japan, and partners said they would mobilize $20 billion of public and private finance to help Indonesia shut coal power plants and bring forward the sector's peak emissions date by 7 years to 2030. Biden and 𝐥𝐸𝐬𝐷 agreed to resume cooperation on climate change. China's outreach. In just his second visit overseas since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, 𝐥𝐸𝐬 held bilateral meetings with many U.S. allies, signaling a willingness to mend ties with critics. Besides the meeting with Biden, 𝐥𝐸𝐬 held talks with Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and French President Emmanuel Macron. A meeting with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was cancelled due to scheduling issues, Downing Street said. 𝐥𝐸𝐬 is set to meet Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida later this week. That's all for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed our video. For more videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon for more interesting videos. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.